go. You all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all?
Hello, and welcome to Rainbow Shelter News. I am your usual host. I forgot I had this particular setting for the news, which is fine. I think I'm going to get rid of... No, I'll keep this. Maybe move chat a little bit. There we go. Just a little bit smaller. It's fine. So tonight we have news. We have news in this news show, so we're going to start as usual with the heavier topics, and this is the news that I found to be interesting. Fuck you, Ezra Miller. Anyways, this is the news I found to be interesting. I get that it's not every bit of news, but I figured for a weekly news show, this should be fine to catch you up on what I consider to be important. Yes, Jinx Tiamat news. Anyways, trans woman Maddie Hoffman killed by police in Pennsylvania. So we have a tendency to cover especially trans-related deaths. I know I am somewhat biased about trans people getting killed for being trans. Not a fan. This woman was killed, was shot to death by police in Malvern, Pennsylvania in May. It's only recently been reported. Yes, trees, indeed. So, police were called to Hoffman's home to do a wellness check on May 19th after receiving a report that a woman there was having a mental health crisis. This is why you should not call police with mental health crisis. 911 is the worst thing to call for that. I know that seems counterintuitive, but it's the fact of the matter. This isn't... police do not deal with disability well. I know I recently did a whole 3-part series about how, commenting on this person's video about how to write madness and how they don't feel sympathy or empathy for people who are neurodivergent in a way that makes them uncomfortable, essentially. And this is a problem. And I think Perfect brought up studies with relation to racism and how if people are in segregated schools, they will more likely to be they're more likely to not feel sympathy or empathy. So having disabled people around you helps in terms of you being able to have sympathy or empathy for the people, which is super important. But yeah, it was recorded on body cam video. The Chester County Attorney's Office said the use of deadly force was justified because the police officer had a reasonable belief that his life and the lives of others were in danger of serious bodily injury or death. which generally is the case with disabled people since we're portrayed as villains. I said villains, closed captioning. But yeah, second trans American known to have been killed by police in 2022. The other being a trans man in Virginia, who is also having a mental health crisis. It's almost like there's a trend. So, trans woman Mia Allen was fatally shot in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on August 29th. The police are searching for Clayton Hubbard, 31, who will face a charge of first-degree reckless homicide. Although, yeah, I don't know. Young trans man tragically dies. Dies away. Died just days after he's brutally beaten at a pride event in Münster, Germany. It feels weird to have the correct name of the town and not have the name of the country. Like Münster, Deutschland. That seems more appropriate than Münster, Germany. It just, I don't know. That's just me. Sorry. It's one of those tragic consequences of learning another language, and you're just like, this feels like I'm swapping between languages. It's weird. The victim was assaulted during the city's Christopher Street Day, an annual event celebrating LGBTQ plus community and fighting discrimination, on Saturday, the 27th of August. I realize I keep ending up doing this show like every other week, I swear. I should be able to get back on a weekly schedule. I was just sick last week, and then a couple weeks ago, mental health reasons. 3 weeks ago, mental health reasons. Anyways, Malta was placed in a medically induced coma as he fought for his life in the hospital, but died from his injuries on Friday. Yeah, perpetrator of horrific hate crime must be caught quickly and held accountable, Lehman said. I hope Malta's death will shake up our society. Well, Germany has a big problem with hatred towards LGBTQ plus community, and violence against queer people is a threat that can be deadly. He called on Germans to stand up against this violence every day. Der Tod von Malta, sie macht mich traurig und fassungslos. Mein Bild und tiefes Mitgefühl. Yeah, sorry. I regret my lack of actual understanding of German. I can read it. I just do not have a good understanding. Something and friend in it. Yeah, I understand words in and out. I haven't actually practiced German in a while, but like, apparently it's being listed as a hate crime right away, and Germany actually has been doing relatively well at trying to combat certain forms of hate, although potentially less successful with other forms of hate. Man dies getting beaten at a pride event. Oh, this is the same story. I didn't notice that. It's my bad. Dee Dee Ricks is the second black trans woman killed in Detroit in a month. So, a 33-year-old black trans woman was fatally shot in Detroit last week, becoming the second trans woman in a month to be murdered there. On August 27th, Dee Dee Ricks was pronounced dead at the scene after police found her on the ground with gunshot wounds to her chest and back. Antoine Close has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder and felony firearm possession. 2 homicides of trans women in 3 weeks. And black trans women are the people most likely targeted because of the inability to escape discrimination. On Friday night, see this, like, the last news show I did, I don't think I could find any stories where anyone died. Then 2 weeks pass and it's just mountains. Too many deaths. On Friday night, police were called to the scene of a stabbing outside popular Long Beach, California gay bar, The Mine Shaft. 2 men were attacked, 1 has died. The perpetrator is still at large. Which, I mean, is awful, but, like, so many people are killed just for being queer, and or because of police mishandling of, neurodivergent people. Police hunt for man seen with trans woman minutes before her death. Oh, okay. This is the Milwaukee one. Okay. So this is one of those things where I try to screen this out sometimes, but I miss them sometimes. So, on to, I guess, somewhat brighter news. A federal jury awards $100 million to man who is left paralyzed after being tasered by police. 4 years after an encounter with police left him paralyzed, 65-year-old Atlanta man scored a victory in the courtroom last week, with federal jury awarding him $100 million. Officer John Grubbs used an unreasonable amount of force during a 2018 arrest of Jerry. Jerry filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court in 2019 after he was paralyzed from the neck down during the arrest. While Jerry attempted to flee, law enforcement Grubbs tased him, which caused the former to fracture his neck after falling and hitting his head in the cement. Body camera footage of the arrest shows Jerry unconscious and motionless. He was panhandling, and the police, of course, rolled up on him, chased him, and then ran after him. Because we don't like homeless people here in America, apparently. I mean, not apparently. We live in America. I mean, it's common knowledge. Anyways, the record would allow the jury to find that Jerry had not been committing a serious crime before he was tased, that Officer Grubbs did not fear for his safety, and that the exigent circumstances were not otherwise severe as to permit Officer Grubbs from use of force. Judge Steve Jones wrote on Friday, but Jerry, who now needs round-the-clock care costing $1 million a year, has already accrued $14 million in medical bills. Of course, this is the case in America. As a result, the city of Atlanta has been ordered to pay Jerry $60 million in addition to another $40 million from Grubbs. So, here's another minor victory. Federal judge blocks Arizona law restricting how public can film police. Filming police is like one of the easiest ways and one of the best ways that we currently can go about showing the actual corruption and abuse by police officers. But yeah, which is why I'm glad a federal judge has shot down the Arizona law that would restrict how public can film police officers. U.S. NBC News reports U.S. District Judge John J. Tucci on Friday issued a preliminary injunction preventing the law from being enforced. Tucci's ruling sides with the American Civil Liberties Union and multiple media outlets who argued the law violated the First Amendment, which makes sense. The bill which Governor Doug Ducey, sorry, I have to. The bill which Governor Doug Ducey signed into law on July 6th was scheduled to go into effect on September 24th, would make it illegal for Arizona to knowingly film law enforcement from 8 feet or closer without an officer's permission. The punishment for violating the law is a misdemeanor that would likely incur a fine without jail time. Campbell, an attorney for the Arizona ACLU, who lobbied against the legislation, told NBC News she's glad the court is taking action to stop it. Yeah, she added, at a time when recording law enforcement interactions is one of the best tools to hold police accountable, we should be working to protect this vital right, not undermine it. Yeah, unfortunately, far too many Republicans have decided to side with authoritarianism as this, which is in opposition to caring about this nation as a republic. Tucci has given the legislature 1 week to appeal his ruling, while the ACLU is seeking a permanent injunction. So the fight is not over yet here, and hopefully Ducey does not get his hands on this and make it worse. So, violence erupts between anti-LGBTQ extremists and anti-fascists counter-protesters at Pride event. So, protests outside a Pride event in Riverside, California erupted into violence on Sunday, leading to the arrest of at least one local far-right extremist. The Inland Empire's Pride Festival, held inside the Riverside Municipal Auditorium, was organized by a local group, Riverside LGBTQ Plus Pride, and was reportedly the first local Pride event since 2009. Inside the venue, the event featured live music, entertainment, dancing, panel discussions, information on the history of the LGBTQ community, and a youth program, according to the press enterprise. However, outside, however, anti-LGBTQ protesters led by local extremist Chris Reyes clashed with local anti-fascist counter-protesters. Video posted on YouTube by News2Share shows protesters, including Reyes, brawling on the street in front of the auditorium. The anti-LGBTQ plus protesters can be seen holding signs and banners with messages like "No disgusting pedo groomers" and "Pedophilia is not a sexual orientation," neither of which are things that the LGBTQ community supports, but are things that authoritarians seem to support. So it's very confusing here. Reyes, who is reportedly organizer of July's far-right quote-unquote Freedom Fest in Phoenix, Arizona, and attended the Stop the Steal rally leading to the January 6th, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol. Really should say insurrection attempt, but that's me being nitpicky. Was arrested following the fight. According to News 2 Share's Ford Fisher, Reyes was later released. Opposition on social media prior to Riverside's Inland Empire Pride Festival led local police to increase security around the event. So this is one of those few cases where police are actually doing their job, and well, police is complicated because they oftentimes have the slogan protect and serve, but also are not legally required to protect or serve. They're only there to justify laws. That's its own conversation, though. California blocks state-funded travel to 4 states that just passed anti-LGBTQ laws. So, the government of California has banned all state-funded travel to Georgia in protest of House Bill 1084, Georgia's recently passed law banning trans girls from playing on team sports matching their gender identity. California has also banned all state-funded travel to Arizona, Indiana, Louisiana, and Utah as a result of each state recently enacting anti-LGBTQ legislation. Now, this is not all travel, this is only state-funded travel, which is essentially the government saying, we do not support these other states. Anyway, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed the law in early April. Less than 1 month earlier, the Georgia High School Association, the athletic association that oversees Georgia high school sports, voted unanimously to enact trans youth sports ban. The ban goes into effect at the start of the 2022 school year. In passing the ban, Georgia ran afoul of California's Assembly Bill. The bill, enacted into law in 2016, restricts state agencies, departments, boards, or commissions from authorizing state-funded travel to a state that has enacted a law authorizing or repealing existing protections against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. According to a press release from the Office of California Attorney General Rob Bonta, whatever, blocking trans youth from playing sports isn't just discriminatory, it's government overreach. It's happening in states across the country, Bonta said. Rather than protecting personal freedom, state legislatures are going out of their way to invent a problem and target the rights of children. It's a gross misuse of public resources. California refuses to take part. And the GHSA's decision could also violate Title IX, the federal law prohibiting sex discrimination in schools, as well as federal court rulings and Democratic President Joe Biden's executive order prohibiting discrimination based on gender identity. At least 12 Republican-led states have passed similar bans. Approximately 24 other states are considering similar legislation. Yeah, it's a mess. So, gay paramedic files lawsuit over harassment and culture of discrimination at Denver Health. So, according to a gay former paramedic for Denver Health, the city's largest health service provider, has been corrupted by a culture of discrimination, retaliation, sexism, and racism, and it needs to stop, according to this person. With ASDA shut on Monday, where do I buy my chicken? Where? Wait, what's ASDA? I don't know anything about ASTA. Oh, it's a British supermarket chain. Yeah, I'm an American. I only know a limited amount of British news, and usually from British sources, so my knowledge about ASTA, I do know that with the death of the previous monarch, everything's been shut down in Britain. Way too much stuff. I heard that Nintendo is not allowing you to play games until the funeral. Like, I feel sorry for anyone who's stuck in Britain. Oh wait, I know because there was also I don't think I had a good story on this, but I saw that there was food banks were shut down, which is which is just, I don't know I don't understand Britain. And specifically England, because constitutional monarchy is weird. The suit follows a string of others filed by employees since 2017, including a whistleblower complaint and one alleging retaliation for calling out racial discrimination. Christensen, who worked at Denver Health since 2012, was fired in January. His complaint details a litany of abuse. Christensen was the object of harassment by one superior, in particular, Lieutenant Christopher Pattinson, since fired for stealing fentanyl, would disparage the paramedics' appearance with comments like, "Do they make those pants in a man's size?" Another mocked Christensen by saying, "Oh, that's right, you wouldn't have kids." According to Christensen, the same superior flashed a white power sign in a photo taken during a award ceremony for a black paramedic. Oh, that's bad. If true, this is the reports of a single person, and as such, although it is a suit being filed. Denver Health brought in outside investigators to address growing complaints of the staff in 2019. One investigator encouraged Mr. Christensen to complain to the defendant's HR department and retain counsel due to the ongoing harassment. Christensen claims his reports were ignored and the harassment has only gotten worse. He also alleges he was singled out for disciplinary action while coworkers escaped scrutiny for the same actions. It was so egregious to the extent that Mr. Christensen started waiting in his car and hiding in his car before he went to work so he didn't have to deal with that type of harassment, the attorney said. According to the suit, the abuse only ended with Christensen's termination when the paramedic was accused of mistreating a patient. Yeah, probably bad. So, as usual, the trans woman was thrown out of a nightclub for using the women's restroom. Piper Ayers told the NBC affiliate that she and friends went to the Dixie Roadhouse to have a little fun. The club's entrance reportedly features a familiar sign warning potential patrons that if you're a racist, sexist, homophobic, or a jerk, don't come in. But Ayers, who was wearing a skirt and high heels, and her friend TJ Jackson say that after she used the women's restroom at the club, Ayers was approached by a security guard who told them the club requires men to use the men's restroom. Ayers said she and Jackson spoke to the club's manager, who told them that the gender indicated on her ID was all that mattered. Ayers had not legally changed her name or gender, which costs money, and obviously cis women have been kicked out of women's restrooms before because of attitudes like that, which is a bit of a problem. Anyways, another club goer, Sean Kelleher, who had only just met Ayers, also tried to help. Kelleher says he told the security guard that Ayers is a woman, a trans woman, and you need to understand what that is. This is not a drag queen or a crossdresser. This is a trans girl, and you need to treat her as a lady. Despite continuous attempts by those involved to explain that she identifies as a woman, Ayers says security escorted her out of the club. Next thing you know, they grab a hold of me and start shoving me out the front door, she said. Yeah, it's one of those things where little things to big things can always create problems like that. So, Florida is not the worst place in this story, because near the end of the show, we will be covering a bunch of horrible Canadian news. Because, dear God, Canada is trying to beat America in awful. It's not winning, but it's doing it darn good. It's hardest. But anyways, the large gaming event set for Florida canceled because of Don't Say Gay law. So, the organizers of a gaming convention who originally planned to hold their event in Florida have canceled, citing both Florida's lax COVID-19 policies and its hardline anti-LGBTQ stance. The group said that the state is no longer a safe place for our community. While we would love to return in person, we've determined that to provide a safe and welcoming event to all, it was best that we move away from our originally planned location in Florida. The website for Games Done Quick says, given the state's continuing disregard for COVID-19 dangers, including anti-mandate vaccine policies and an increased aggression towards LGBTQ plus individuals, including the law colloquially known as the Don't Say Gay bill, we do not believe it is a safe place for our community at this time. GDQ organizes charity events that involve speedruns or shows of video game skill where players finish games as fast as possible, often using programming bugs creatively and employing novel strategies that game developers didn't anticipate. I've actually... the speedrunning communities tend to be nice. I don't think I've met a mean speedrunner yet. Or at least none that I'm aware of. Usually the competitive games are more... The different type of competitive games are usually worse. But me, that's just me. This is just a colloquial bias? Whatever. Anyways. The group's upcoming winter event, Awesome Games Done Quick, was originally planned to be held in Orlando on January 2023, and was going to be GDQ's return to in-person events after 2 years of virtual-only events due to the COVID pandemic. The event will be a fundraiser for the Prevent Cancer Foundation. Several prominent speedrunners who participate in GDQ events are trans, and trans people have been especially targeted by Florida Republicans. In the past several years, the state passed a ban on trans students participating in school sports, banned trans people of all ages from using Medicaid insurance to cover gender-affirming care, instructed schools to ignore federal law banning anti-LGBTQ discrimination in education, and Governor Ron the douchebag even declared a cis woman the winner of a swimming competition because he didn't like the fact that trans women won. The state got national notoriety for what has been dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, which bans discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity in younger grades and restricts them in older grades. School districts have already interpreted the law to mean they can't acknowledge LGBTQ people's existence, while schools ban books that conservatives accuse of quote-unquote grooming kids for child sex abuse, and advise LGBTQ teachers not to have pictures of their same-sex spouses on their desk. The law also targets trans people in particular, requiring schools to out trans students to their parents if teachers find out their identities. GQ used to hold their winter events in DC until it was moved to Orlando in early 2020. Since its inception in 2010, the event has raised $35 million for various charities, including Doctors Without Borders and the Malala Fund, a non-profit organization for girls' education. The January 2023 event will be held online. Boise Pride cancels Drag Kids event after organizers received death threats. So, the Boise Pride event in Idaho had to cancel its half-hour Drag Kids event after its producers started receiving death threats. The event would have allowed children to put on sparkly dresses and lip-sync to songs, the Associated Press reported, but Idaho Republican Party Chairwoman Dorothy Moon said that Pride event sponsors were financing the sexualization of our children and the perverse idea that children should engage in sexual performances with adult entertainers. Now, to my knowledge, there's nothing sexual about wearing a dress and singing. But that's just me, I guess. I guess I'm the odd one out, not considering just wearing a dress and singing, not even singing, lip syncing. I don't consider that to be sexual. Anyways, her claim was repeated by state Republican Party and other far-right websites and podcasts. And then conservative pastor said the local Ada County Sheriff should arrest anyone who contributes to the delinquency of minors. Yeah, I mean, children... It's pretty basic, so... Where's the death threat? Right owners have issues terroristic bomb and death threats against local libraries and restaurants for holding these events. Such protesters sometimes infiltrate the venues, frightening children and their families, as well as recording and threatening public exposure to adults who participate in them. Yeah, this article did not do a good job of explaining the death threat part as much as mentioning that death threats and threatening behaviors have happened elsewhere. But maybe there wasn't much to say on that. So, a disabled young patient was sent to get treatment. He was abused instead, and he wasn't the last. So as Blaine Reichert rose from a breakfast table at the Trotte Mental Health and Development Center in Southern Illinois, a worker ordered him to pull up his sagging pants. A 24-year-old man with developmental disabilities. Reichert was accustomed to workers at state-run residential facility telling him what to do, but this time he didn't obey. I'm a gangsta, this is how we do it where I'm from, responded Reichert, who, despite street tough defiance, still slept with the teddy bear. Investigators who later came to the scene in 2014 incident heard various versions of what happened next, but multiple witnesses told the Illinois State Police that shortly after this exchange, Reichert was taken to the floor, held down by 4 mental health techs, and repeatedly punched in the face, according to a 700-page state police investigation obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. Reichert cursed and spat, trying to fight back. I mean, understandable. I would fight back if 4 people were trying to hold me down and beat the shit out of me. His resistance was met with more blows, according to witness accounts. Reichert, who diagnoses include autism, would later tell police it felt like he was hit 100 times. Multiple employees, including a doctor, told investigators that Reichert's injuries were the worst they'd ever seen. One tech told police she vomited at the sight of his injured face. Located about 120 miles southeast of St. Louis, Trotte serves people with the most profound disabilities in the state, whatever that means. In 2009, the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division had cited Trotte for failing to protect residents from physical and psychological abuse and other harm. The federal agency stopped short of suing the state of Illinois, a step it has taken against other states, and closed its investigation in 2013, saying in a report to Congress that Illinois officials had made adequate improvements. Apparently not, as this, they say 2014? Yeah, 2014 incident, so, did not make real improvements, I say. Anyways, the record beating happened the next year, just before Christmas. Well, it is one of the most egregious examples of abuse of the Trotte resident in a decade. A month-long investigation by Capital News Illinois, Lee Enterprises, and ProPublica has found that the incident is one of many incidences of mistreatment at the rural facility managed by the Illinois Department of Human Services. Reports from this team filed more than 50 public records requests, reviewing thousands of pages of internal documents from the IDHS and its Inspector General, the Illinois State Police, officials in Union County, where the facility is located, and other entities. The documents and interviews with current and former employees and advocates, and with residents and their guardians, revealed a systemic pattern of patient abuse, neglect, humiliation, and exploitation. Profound usually means least verbal and least compliant. Yeah, that sounds about right. Over a 10-year period running through 2021, the state police opened at least 40 criminal investigations into alleged employee misconduct at Trotte, more than at any of IDHS's other facilities in southern Illinois. Using court records and Illinois State Police case files, reporters found at least 26 Trotte employees were arrested on felony charges over roughly the same time period, including 4 who are connected to the record case. Employees have since been accused of whipping, choking, punching, and raping residents. Because nothing says... I couldn't even finish the sentence. Among the more recent arrestees are 4 employees who were accused of choking and beating another Trotte patient in 2020, leading to felony battery charges. 2 have pleaded guilty to misdemeanor battery charges in exchange for probation sentences, and 2 cases are still pending. In 2020, an employee was charged with a felony battery for allegedly taking off his belt and using it to repeatedly whip a resident. Then, earlier this year, an employee was charged with criminal sexual assault of an intellectually disabled person who lived at the facility. In another 2022 case, an employee was charged for allegedly grabbing a nonverbal patient with the mental capacity of a 15-month-old by the neck and punching him in the back of the head as a security officer watched, according to court records. These 3 cases are still pending. Over the years, advocates have called for the facility to be closed. It's a purely political decision to keep Choate open, says civil rights attorney Thomas Kennedy, who has provided legal services to Choate patients on and off for decades. It's not about helping people. It's not about habilitating or rehabilitating people. It's about keeping jobs in the community, period. They have failed miserably at any other mission. So, a lot more awful stuff. It's just all awful stuff. Mental age theory is BS too. Yeah, Reichard was discharged from Choate after the assault, but was readmitted 3 years ago after he attacked his mother, deemed by a judge to be unfit to stand trial. He lives in the Sycamore unit, the same building where the assault occurred. So basically, nothing's changed, it seems, although you can go into just a quick link if you want to read the rest of this. I know if you're watching this on YouTube, the link will be below. Louisiana tells schools to keep discriminating against trans students. Because, of course, one moment, I need to take medication, so I need to quick turn my camera off. But the Louisiana State Superintendent of Education is telling schools that they can continue to discriminate against trans students if they want to. In June, the Biden administration released a series of proposed changes to the Title IX regulations that would include explicit anti-discrimination protections for LGBTQ students. The proposal is currently undergoing public comment. Brumley recently sent a letter to school and athletic administrators telling them that at this time, they do not have to implement these changes. So Brumley, more like Cumley. LDOE does not agree to the proposed changes, Cumley wrote, adding that school systems should not alter their local policies or procedures based solely on these overreaching guidance documents. Cumley also referenced the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, an anti-trans sports bill that recently became law in the state. Because definitely it's all about fairness. It was overwhelmingly passed by our legislature, Cumley said. It affirms school-sanctioned athletic participation must be divided by biological sex unless the configuration is co-ed in nature. And how they determine biological sex? Why, simple. They just checked to see what the doctor said when they decided to determine the biological sex, regardless of any of the, intersex people. Are intersex people supposed to... I don't want to get into that. That's going to be a long conversation. And with the problems of this BS. Biden administration will reportedly release more detailed guidance on how the Title IX changes would affect athletics. This is not the first time Cumley has made it clear he supports discrimination against trans students. In July, after the proposed changes to Title IX were announced, Cumley sent a letter to Biden asking officials if refusing to implement the proposed changes would result in a loss of funding to Louisiana schools. According to the Advocate, he asked if schools that receive federal funding, and specifically funding for breakfast and lunch programs, would be penalized for banning students from using locker rooms and restrooms that do not align with their sex assigned at birth, i.e., whether or not the child parts of a baby looked more dickish or more cuntish. Anyways. We shouldn't discriminate against any children in any school, Cumley said at the time. But at the same time, I don't think it's appropriate for biological males to be in little girls' bathroom. What the fuck is wrong with this person? Who the biological males? What the fuck are you using to check that? Are you peeping in on boys' locker rooms? Fucking perv. Creepy ass perv. I think it'd be in opinion shared by the majority of students in the state of Louisiana. Everyone wants to check and look at little boys' dicks, just like Cumley here wants. Anyways, he added that it's hard for him to even comprehend that the federal government would consider taking away meals from our neediest children because of some philosophical beliefs they hold. Oh, that's the most dickish thing to say. It's all like, oh, that's God, Cumley seems to be a dickhead. Cumley also voiced his concern that the new guidelines would allow trans students to participate on sports teams that align with their gender identity, and asked whether it would be considered discriminatory for teachers to use the students' preferred pronouns. Yeah, because it's a dick move, Cumley, you dickhead. Jesus Christ. Like, that's like saying, oh, is it rude for me to call you whatever name I want to call you, not whatever name you want to call yourself? It's like, yeah, it's a dick move. Yeah. What are you gonna do? Call every person you're like, oh, hey Brian, you look like a Brian, so I'm gonna call you Brian from now on. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Anyways, family awarded $275,000 after cops handcuff and berate a 5-year-old boy for nearly an hour. After 2.5 years, a family in Silver Spring, Maryland has been awarded $250,000 settlement, and 2 Montgomery County police officers have been suspended without pay, which actually is surprisingly not common. Usually the cops get suspended with pay, so I'm glad they got at least suspended without pay. I would prefer that they get fired, because this is absolute bullshit, and they'll probably do it again. If not this specifically, something similar, because they likely haven't had enough experience with black people in general, and thus lack the capacity to feel sympathy and empathy for black people, I assume. Because usually I assume black people, because it's Blavity News, and also cops tend to target black children and act like they're adults or something. It's a fucking 5-year-old. Incident involving a 5-year-old boy who fled his elementary school, Washington Post reports. In 2021, body cam footage released of officers Kevin Christman and Dion Holiday verbally attacking and restraining the minor child. The incident happened on January 14th, 2020. As Bellevue previously reported, the 51-minute body cam footage involved a kindergartner at East Silver Springs Elementary School. The 5-year-old ran away from the school, and an administrator then called the police to find the child. Oh my god. We need to change the way we do policing. We should have police deal with violent stuff, and we should have people who know how to deal with other stuff like children. Like, deal with children. Don't send fucking armed cops to go deal with children. Especially if they're racist, which I assume these ones are, if they're berating a fucking 5-year-old. Anyways, once they found him and brought him back to the school, both Christman and Holiday repeatedly yelled and insulted the young boy for running away. The video begins with the officers finding the little boy in a neighborhood. Christman approaches the young boy, questioning him about his actions. He then asks the small child, "Are you 18? 5-year-old kid, I think we know the fucking answer to that. Seconds later, he grabs the boy's wrist and the boy begins to cry. As the officer puts him in the back of the cruiser, the boy cries, "I don't want to go." "I don't care," Christman shouts back. "You don't make that decision for yourself." According to the footage, they shouted and insulted the boy for running away. "I don't like bad children. Disrespectful children. I think they need to be beaten. I hope she beats you when you go home because you deserve it for your actions today. You were horrible." Oh my god. Holiday says in the video, "Oh my god. What the fuck?" The officers then were then heard calling the child "shepherd for the devil" and "little beast," according to the Washington Post. The Post also notes that Christman and Holiday were suspended for 2 weeks and 4 weeks respectively following the investigation. Both officers defended their actions, with Christman saying, "I really do think my actions were appropriate at the time," according to the Post. You know, yelling at a child constantly. Saying they're a shepherd for the devil. Totally appropriate. At least, to be fair, at least these just seem like regular awful people. It might not have been a racist thing. These are just regular awful people. It's looking like reading into this more. Christman said his actions were justified considering the child seemed defiant and headstrong and not wanting to return to school. Yeah, children are like that. Don't have kids. You're bad at it. You're bad at dealing with kids. Boy's mother, Shanta Grant, was represented by Matthew Bennell and James Papermeister, who said the officers treated her son as if he were a hardened criminal, according to the Associated Press. It was way past the line of emotional child abuse. Lawyers Matthew Bennett and James Papiermeister wrote in their court filings. Post reports settlement money received by the family will be placed in a trust fund, which the child will be able to access when he turns 18. I don't know if it's quite so much treating the child like a hardened criminal. I've seen stuff relating to police treating hardened criminals. It's worse than this, but it's still fucked up. A small non-profit condemned electric shocks on autistic people Now it's facing a lawsuit threat. As an autistic person, I am opposed to getting electric shock treatment. I don't want that to happen. Today, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression demanded the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center drop its threat of litigation against Neuroclastic, an autistic-led advocacy nonprofit. Neuroclastic received the threat of defamation suit after it published the results of a survey about the Rotenberg Center's use of electric shock devices. I was terrified when I got the letter from the Judge Rotenberg Center's most notorious lawyer, said Neuroclastic founder and CEO Tara Vance. But the autistic people at the Judge Rotenberg Center cannot defend themselves, so we will. FIRE believes in the value of our freedom to use our voices, and even those of autistic people who do not speak. They understand that we don't just want to fight back, but that we have to fight back. The Rotenberg Center, an institution that houses autistic and other disabled people as young as 5, is infamous for its use of devices that administer electric shocks to residents through remote control. The practice is so notorious that it was condemned by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture. Neuroclastic is awesome as fuck, yeah. No, this is a place condemned by the United Nations as a place torturing autistic and other disabled people. In August 2021, Neuroclastic evaluated the views of professionals in the field of applied behavioral analysis regarding the Neuroberg Center's use of electric shock devices to program autistic people's behavior. Oh my god, yeah. I hate that. What Rotenberg is doing, the Rotenberg Center is doing. The findings, which were published on Neuroclastic's website, note that 89% of surveyed professionals were strongly opposed to the electric shock devices used by the Rotenberg Center. On April 27th, the Rotenberg Center sent Neuroclastic a cease and desist letter arguing that 7 statements in the article were defamatory. It threatened to sue Neuroclastic for damages if it did not permanently and immediately delete the objectionable statements. The Rotenberg Center is trying to bully a critic, a small nonprofit, into silence, said FIRE attorney Gabe Walters. FIRE doesn't give in to bullies. We stand up to them. Neuroclastic stands by all statements made in the article, barring one, or at the request of a survey respondent. Neuroclastic edited the article to lower its estimate of the power of the shocks from 10 to 6 times more powerful than that of the stun gun, to account for variations in power among stun guns and differences among shock devices at the Rotenberg Center. However, this survey respondent also notes the Rotenberg Center's most powerful electric shock device is 18 times more powerful than a stun gun. I don't want to do... Look, I just need to be real with you for a second here. Look. I've experienced enough traumatic brain injury. I'm pretty sure it would be really bad for me to have that much shock sent into my body. And Yeah, I'm just gonna say it now. Not a fan. Not a fan. Don't want to be shocked with stuff 18 times more powerful than a stun gun. What the fuck is wrong with these people? Anyways, the Rotenberg Center's use of electric shock devices on autistic people has received widespread media attention, and the Rotenberg Center has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars lobbying state and federal governments and suing the FDA to continue to use the devices because they really want to electrocute autistic people. Sure. So, because the Rotenberg Center is well known for use of devices, the First Amendment requires that if it sues for defamation, it must prove by clear and convincing evidence that Neuroclastic knew its statements were false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. Additionally, defamation only applies to statement of fact. Opinions, including opinions on electric shock therapy, are not actionable in a defamation suit. Fire's letter explains that the threatened defamation claims are meritless and puts the Rotenberg Center on notice to preserve all future records of the use of electric shock devices given its threat of further legal action. Additionally, Fire notes that an apology from the Rotenberg Center and retractions of its litigation threat is warranted. Just because the Rotenberg Center doesn't like what Neuroclastic has to say doesn't mean their critics are defamatory, says Walters. The Rotenberg Center wants Neuroclastic to cease and desist, but Neuroclastic and Fire won't cease or desist in our advocacy and free expression. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expressions is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to defending and sustaining the individual rights of all Americans to free speech and free thought, the most essential qualities of liberty. Fire educates Americans about the importance of these unalienable rights, promotes culture of respect of these rights, and provides means to preserve them. Power aside, they're doing everything wrong. Yeah, more awful. This is... Look, a bunch of awful stuff happened this week. Not gonna lie, there's not a lot of happy news this week. Usually I try to add a bunch of jokey type stories, and I might have a couple, but and there's some good news, don't get me wrong. Like, winning lawsuits is a good thing, but you can have whatever you want, but the problem is the actions. Euthanasia involves manipulation in practice of people. Their life is bad. You can have your own bodily autonomy and make your own choices. But if people are wanting euthanasia from stuff that society can change, but won't, it's the it's essentially getting rid of undesirables. Which I don't like, and there are pressure. We will get to the Canada stories later, but there are pressure campaigns. That's your opinion. I don't really understand what makes you like, I had a friend, or I had a friend's cousin I knew had schizophrenia, and I didn't find that person to be undesirable. Maybe I'm, like, it's an opinion statement. The desirability is a social aspect. It's not a definitive factual aspect. The idea of euthanasia is good, but it's fine because bodily autonomy. People should have the rights to things, but in practice, it's oftentimes involves pressuring and ignoring things like even when laws make it somewhat restricted. Like, there's a story later on about people with PTSD being pressured to undergo euthanasia, which is incredibly problematic. And this is the problem with in practice. In practice, shut up, Doomer, because I'm saying positive stuff? I'm confused. Society can change. Society is capable of changing. Things are actually getting better in some aspects and getting worse in others. You like cheese on waffles? Then have cheese on waffles. Go ahead. I don't care. Actually, cheese on waffles sounds kind of good. I get cheese on waffles. That might be interesting. I've never had cheese on waffles. Anyways. A church's trans pride flag was burned in the middle of the night. An LGBTQ inclusive church outside of Boston recently became the target of anti-trans hate when, in the middle of the night, someone burned the trans pride flag and that the church flew on its front lawn. The United Parish in Brookline, Massachusetts, posted a photo of the charged and shriveled flag on Facebook, declared that hate and violence shown on our lawn has no place in the kind of world that Jesus imagined and God created. We at the United Parish of Brookline believe that all people are made in the image of God and embrace and cherish every person and every kind of family. Jesus Christ welcomed everyone. We seek to follow his example in our own life and worship by extending God's love and grace abundantly and equally to everyone. I don't know enough about Jesus Christ to say whether Jesus Christ's gender identity. Nor have I thought about it too much. Maybe. I don't know anything about Jesus. I was born and raised Jewish. I only have limited study of the Bible in my own free time. We affirm and welcome all people to share in worship, fellowship, and leadership with us. We join us in diversity of race, gender, and sexual identity, physical and mental ability, ethnicity, and economic means. Church leaders won't let the act intimidate them. They plan to replace the flag with an even bigger one and also make it harder to reach, NBC Boston reports. We believe the Christian faith is a progressive faith, Reverend Kent French, who identifies as queer, told the publication that it's one that's always looking forward, always looking to include. French added that the crime is a reflection of the fact that people are challenged by difference and that we are living in divisive times. Sorry, that was just a... You know what? I'm accepting that. That is a wonderful statement right there. I'm different, but pounding Jesus Christ's pussy. I don't think there's another. I don't think there's a better statement than that. I'm sorry that the auto mod held that for review. I don't know. I blame Twitch. Children's hospital forced to evacuate after bomb threat over trans kids. Following weeks-long harassment from anti-LGBTQ groups, police are investigating an anonymous bomb threat that was called in to Boston Children's Hospital Tuesday night. According to NBC News, the Boston Police Department sent its bomb squad to the hospital at around 8:14 p.m. on Tuesday, but found no explosive devices or suspicious items. On Wednesday morning, Detective John Boyle said the investigation was still active. We are relieved no bomb was found and that employees and patients are safe, the hospital said in a statement. We remain vigilant in our efforts to battle the spread of false information about the hospital and our caregivers. We are committed to ensuring the hospital is a safe place, or a safe and secure place for all who work here and come here. We will provide additional information as we are able. So on August 11th, Chaya Raishik, who runs the anti-LGBTQ Twitter account Libs of TikTok, reposted an expose by Christina Buttons for the right-wing site Post Millennial, sponsored by conspiracy theorist Mike Lindell and CEO of MyPillow. The special report consisted of videos publicly available on Boston Children's website, along with commentary insinuating that children as young as 2 or 3 were receiving gender-affirming surgery at the hospital, which is not something that happens. Like, I spent... what was it? 10, like, 5, no. Yeah, about 10 plus years trying to get, to get any amount of transition. Like, there's no way. Well, for one thing, I know 2 or 3-year-olds aren't receiving gender-affirming surgery outside of intersex people who are receiving forced surgery, but that's not what these people are talking about. Fact-checking on the site PolitiFact later debunked the claims. PolitiFact is sometimes more accurate than others. Patients qualifying for gender-reaffirming surgery must be at least 18 years old and have a persistent, well-documented gender dysphoria, according to the hospital's website. All genital surgeries are only performed on patients age 18 and older. And misinformation was peddled, because of course it was. Montana adopts sketchy rule to stop trans people from changing their birth certificates. Now, in terms of birth certificate stuff, I'm not usually, even in states where you can't affirm birth certificates via the state rules, they still have to follow the rules other judges put out. So, like, if you get a ruling, so let's say Montana adopts this law. I'm not sure what the law is specifically yet, but, like, if I get a ruling from a Minnesota state judge about changing my birth certificate, I believe generally Montana will still go through with it. It's a a weird thing about the legal system. The rule changes list an ongoing legal battle between the DPHHS, the state's Republican-led legislature, and trans Montanans seeking government documents that display their correct gender identities. The DPHHS's new rule says that a person's sex listed on a birth certificate can now only be changed if it was incorrectly entered by a quote-unquote data entry error, or if quote-unquote the sex of the individual was misidentified on the original certificate and the department receives a correction affidavit and supporting documents, including a copy of the results of chromosomal, molecular, karyotypic DNA, or genetic testing that identify the sex of the individual. So those don't necessarily always agree. Anyways, the DPHHS implemented this rule 5 months after a state judge issued a ruling blocking a state law requiring state residents to undergo a non-specified surgical procedure before they could change the gender listed on their birth certificates. Previous to the law, the DPHHS said that trans residents could change the gender markers on their birth certificates if they were intersex, had undergone, quote-unquote, a gender transition, or had a certified court order indicating that their gender had been changed. In July 2021, 2 trans state residents sued the state governors, Greg Gianforte, DPHHS, and its director, claiming that the SB 280 had made it virtually impossible for them to change their birth certificates, thus violating their constitutional right to privacy and due process, which would be the problem with that. Anyways, denying me an accurate birth certificate placed me at risk of embarrassment or even violence every time I'm required to present my birth certificate because it incorrectly identifies me as male, said Amelia Marquez, one of the plaintiffs and a trans woman, in a statement. SB 280 also made it impossible for many trans people to get a corrected birth certificate because such surgery is too expensive for many people. Not all trans people want or need gender-affirming genital surgery, and many are not good candidates for it for medical reasons. The state disagrees that it's necessary to maintain accuracy of birth records. Now, there's a lot of information that can be changed with birth records. So what generally happens is they go through the same process as adoption when birth certificates are changed. So if you're changing your gender, your original birth certificate is sealed and you get a new birth certificate. No information is destroyed regardless of what happens. Anyways, in April 2022, State Judge Michael Moses said that the law's requirement of an unspecified surgical procedure made it impossible for anyone to follow. The judge then issued a temporary injunction against SB 280, essentially blocking it from going into effect. But the state chapter of the ACLU says that Montana's government officials have done nothing to comply with the judge's order. For instance, gender change form that DPHHS removed from its website after SB 280 was passed still hasn't returned to the website. The fact that the state refuses to revert to the previous processes, it evidences its lack of respect for the judiciary and utter disregard for the trans Montanans who speak to have a birth certificate that accurately indicates what they know their sex to be. The ACLU said in their statement, if the state continues to violate the preliminary injunction, we will have no choice but to seek relief from the court. And Montana has passed several other anti-LGBTQ laws, which, no surprise. So, because the Supreme Court is awful, and because some Orthodox synagogues are awful, the U.S. Supreme Court allows particular Orthodox Jewish university to deny an LGBTQ group. Now, I was born and raised Reform Jewish, where we had a lesbian rabbi. So I do not have the typical experience, but I am well aware of various Orthodox Jews, like Ben Shapiro and like others, who seem to care more about conservative policies than they care about the Torah or Look, I'm not a practicing Jew. I lose my Jew card for not remembering the Tanakh. There we go. I can brain really well sometimes. Anyways, the U.S. Supreme Court has granted temporary permission for an Orthodox Jewish university in New York to deny official recognition to an LGBTQ student group. Yeshiva University turned to the court for an urgent ruling after a New York State judge said the school had to let the Pride Alliance register as a student association, which would give it access to certain facilities and services. As a deeply religious Jewish university, Yeshiva cannot comply with that order because doing so would violate sincere religious beliefs and about how to form its undergraduate students in Torah values, the university stated in its appeal. Now, like I said, I was born and raised Jewish with a lesbian rabbi, so things aren't that simple. And even with the Torah, and this is a very restrictive view on things. Anyways, the university, however, offers many classes on subjects other than religion and has non-Jews among its student body, the Pride Alliance argued in response. It may not deny certain students access to the non-religious resources it offers the entire student community on the basis of sexual orientation, the Alliance said. On Friday, the Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, granted an emergency request by the university suspending the state judge's decision pending further deliberation. The Supreme Court likely did it based off of a common trope of conversation, which is states' rights and religious freedom. But given that it does have various other degree forms, because people's expression of religion should be unique to them, because not all Jewish people who are Orthodox Jews are anti-LGBTQ. That is a specific subset of a particular group, and given that Hebrew, like, if you go to translations of the Torah, you can make arguments about it not being as anti-LGBTQ as this particular view on the Torah. But that's a whole nother conversation. Teacher accused of using racial slur to describe black educator conducts cotton picking exercise. Because, of course, An incident at Oakbrook Middle School is under investigation after a student alleges a teacher used a racial slur and called a fellow teacher in the neighboring class the monkey next door. Shauna Wiggins said her 8th grader was upset when his teacher allegedly referred to a black professor as the monkey next door. Wiggins said her 8th grade son came home upset after hearing the comment and told her the same teacher asked the class to participate in a cotton picking activity where she brought in raw cotton for the class. Wiggins contacted the Dorchester District School Administration to rectify the situation, but has not heard back. According to ABC, a recording of the meeting with the teacher is released, and the teacher can be heard admitting she made the monkey statement, but says she didn't mean it that way. She also defended her statements by inciting that the neighboring teacher is her friend, who she calls that. I guess she feels that because that's her friend, she can talk that way. The assistant principal, she said that sometimes kids don't understand adult-to-adult conversation, but when you're speaking with a classroom full of children, referencing the teacher that way, that's wrong. Yeah, I was shocked when she said that, Wiggins said. Regarding the teacher's classroom behavior, the Dorchester School District issued a statement to ABC4 noting that it takes every claim seriously. Dorchester School District 2 takes every allegation seriously. We are currently investigating the alleged incidents at Oakbrook Middle School. We do not comment on personnel matters. The district statement read. How else do you mean that way? Yeah, I mean, yeah. All staff should recognize that they're being continuously observed by students and that their actions and demeanor will be reflected in the conduct of the students, the district noted. The teacher has not been met with any disciplinary actions from the district. Now, it seems we have evidence of the first statement, but not... I don't know as much about the other statement, although if they asked other children, they could probably verify the cotton picking thing, and it's all messed up. Ex-NYPD cop sentenced to 10 years for Capitol riot involvement, which is the insurrection attempt. Longest sentence yet. Thomas Webster, a 20-year New York Police Department veteran, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for his involvement in the insurrection attempt that took place at United States Capitol building on January 6, 2021. Approximately 10,000 people were stormed the Capitol grounds, at least 2,000 of them making it inside. Many engaged in violent actions, with the officers trying to protect the building and the lawmakers inside. Webster was one of those people. Webster's image became synonymous with being the writer who pinned a DC officer to the ground with a flagpole. More than 225 accused rioters were charged with assault, resisting, or impeding officers or employees. Webster was the first Capitol riot defendant to be tried on an assault charge and the first to present a self-defense argument. A jury rejected the claim that he was defending himself when he tackled Officer Noah Rathbun and grabbed his gas mask. He was sentenced by Judge Amit P. Mehta to 10 years, the longest sentence yet. Two other rioters were sentenced separately to 7 years and 3 months in prison. In a court filing, prosecutors accused 56-year-old Thomas Webster of disgracing a democracy that he once fought honorably to protect and serve. Now, I disagree with that statement, as police officers don't actually protect and serve. Now, understanding problems and doing something about things. There's still action to be taken that can improve things. Mentioning bad stuff doesn't mean I think the bad stuff is inevitable. And I think we can move towards improvement by like even basic stuff like getting to know your neighbors, stuff like that. I may have been affected by the Doomer comment. Body cam footage shows Columbus cop fatally shooting Donovan Lewis while in bed. So, police in Columbus, Ohio have released body camera footage that shows the horrific moments leading up to one of the officers fatally shooting an unarmed black man while he laid in bed. CNN reports. Donovan Lewis, 20, died on Tuesday after being shot by Columbus police officer Ricky Anderson. According to the police statement, Anderson was a veteran assigned to the K-9 unit with decades of experience. Apparently, not decades enough. As the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation investigates the shooting, Anderson has been placed on leave. The shooting occurred on Tuesday around 2 a.m. at an apartment building where officers... Yeah. I was just trying to trick thing. Ignore that. Anyways, 137. Okay, halfway done. Shooting occurred on Tuesday around 2 a.m. in the apartment building where officers were serving a felony warrant for domestic violence, assault, and improper handling of a firearm. Police say Lewis was the person named in the felony warrant. Body camera footage shows police knocking and calling out to those in the apartment several times for more than 8 minutes. Officers knocked on the door for several minutes, acknowledged themselves as Columbus police officers. Columbus Police Chief Elaine Bryant said, according to CNN. The man then came to the door and was taken into police custody. He told officers he had just been asleep, and they confiscated a knife from him. The second man inside the apartment was also taken to custody. According to Bryant, officers asked if there was anyone else in the apartment, but it couldn't be determined, so Anderson and a K-9 were called to search the place. Once the K-9 officer arrived at the scene, additional announcements were made for anyone else inside to come out, or the K-9 was going to be released into the apartment. Body cam footage shows the K-9 barking outside the bedroom. Officers entered the apartment and warned they're going to send a dog in. Less than a second after the opening of the bedroom door, the body cam footage shows Anderson immediately firing his weapon as Lewis sits up in bed. Officers only started to help Lewis after they handcuffed him. He's taken to a nearby hospital where he's pronounced dead at 3:19 a.m. That does seem like excessive force. The body cam footage was released yesterday afternoon and says it all. He said in a statement, in literally the blink of an eye, a Columbus police officer shot and killed Donovan Lewis, an unarmed young black man who is alone in his bed in the middle of the night. Now, this is not as reckless as the Breonna Taylor case. However, it's still a major problem for it. Now, this was police officers who should have known better, and for the most part did their job as they should have until the end there. They're doing good. They're doing good. They're doing like peaceful stuff. They're announcing and all that jazz. The last part, really bad. Really bad. Like really incompetently bad. Police Chief Elaine Bryan further explained that it was believed Anderson fired because Lewis appeared to raise his hand while holding something. That's always the excuse. There was like a vape pen that was found in the bed right next to him, Bryant said. The Guardian reports. However, Bryant further showed sympathy for Lewis' loved one, saying Donovan Lewis lost his life. As a parent, I sympathize and grieve with the mother. As a community, I grieve with our community, but we're going to allow this investigation to take place. We're committed to full transparency, and we're committed to holding officers accountable if there was any wrongdoing. As chief, it's my job to hold officers accountable, and it's also my job to support them through the process. Now, this is one of those circumstances where it's a lot more complicated. And this is where life gets complicated. It's blink of the eye decisions. There was a warrant out. This is not something that, assuming accountability, this is at worst like reaction. There might actually be, depending on the body cam footage, there might actually be justification for this particular case. This is one of those things where it's a case-by-case basis. This is definitely a lot more complicated, and it looks like they didn't go in guns blazing, and this person may have actually been concerned. This is one of those ambiguous one where there's not enough information to make a strong judgment on this particular case. Trans students in Oklahoma are suing the state over its transphobic bathroom bill. Being able to use the boys' restroom might seem like a small thing to others, but it's a vital step in my transition, said 16-year-old Andy Bridge. 3 students in Oklahoma are suing state and school officials over their latest bathroom bill, denying trans kids the same rights as their fellow cisgender classmates. And I think that's the thing that transphobes oftentimes don't get, or tend to ignore, which is the fact that trans men also get barred from using the restroom, using the boys' restroom. It's not like, it's not, it affects a lot of people. Andy Bridge, a 16-year-old, and 2 other students who filed lawsuit anonymously are being represented by Lambda Legal and the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, and the ACLU of Oklahoma, so specifically the Oklahoma version of the Oklahoma version of the ACLU. You know what I mean. Anyways, in May, the Oklahoma State Senate passed the Senate Bill SB 615 in a 38-7 vote. The bill was quickly signed into law by Governor Kevin Schitt. The law forces all pre-kindergarten through 12th grade public schools and public charter schools in the state to restrict trans students from use of restrooms and locker rooms to those consistent with the gender they were assigned at birth. The law mandates a reduction in funding for school districts that don't comply and allows parents to sue school districts if they believe their child is in danger of sharing a restroom with a trans classmate. Supporters of the new law say it promotes safety. In the law filed by the Schitt on Tuesday, the lawsuit, it wasn't filed by the Schitt, my bad, says SB 615 violates the U.S. Constitutional and Title IX by discriminating based on sex, gender identity, and trans status. The complaint alleges the plaintiffs, including Bridge, another high school student, and a middle school student, will be irreparably harmed by the law. The suit calls on the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma to issue a preliminary injunction to block its enforcement. Bridge said in a statement, "I'm a boy, and while living authentically hasn't always been easy, quote-unquote single-gendered spaces don't make anyone safer." Yeah. It has given me a sense of relief and happiness. Being able to use the boys' restroom might seem like a small thing to others, but it's a vital step in my transition. According to the lawsuit, Bridge, a senior at Noble High School, just south of Oklahoma City, used the boys' restroom at his school last year without issue. With the new law on the books, he was told this fall by the school's principal and vice principal that he was now required to use a single occupancy restroom instead. Bridge was warned that if he violates the new policy, he will be subject to disciplinary action. Can't have those transes using. You can't have those trans men using the men's restroom. Oh no, will destroy men. Anyways, feel singled out and excluded. Yeah, that makes sense. LGBTQ students in Florida school district successfully organized earlier this year to oust two LGBTQ people from local school board. The now former school board members supported book banning and the state's Don't Say Gay law. Texas court rules anti-LGBTQ plus Christian companies can deny life-saving PrEP coverage. Judge Reed O'Connor ruled that the inclusion of HIV treatment was in violation of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act on Wednesday, the 7th of September, after companies Braidwood Management and Kelly Orthodontics brought the case to the U.S. District Court. Represented by notorious anti-abortion lawyer Jonathan Mitchell, the companies filed the lawsuit claiming that PrEP coverage in the Affordable Health Care Act forced anti-LGBTQ plus religious companies to finance quote-unquote homosexual behavior, because there are people out there who still think AIDS can only be spread by gay sex. This is one of those easier stories. I don't even, I'm looking at the time and the amount of coverage. This is pretty straightforward. There's more of the same BS, like WTF Texas. Texas agency aimed for secrecy on probes of trans supportive parents. Employees of Texas Child Welfare Agency were told to avoid written communications and take other steps to maintain secrecy about investigations of parents who would allow their trans children to receive gender-affirming care. The investigations began after Governor Greg Abbott, I couldn't think of a good joke off the top of my head, ordered them in Friday based on non-binding legal opinion from Attorney General Ken Paxton that allowing kids access to such care is child abuse. Both are far-right anti-LGBTQ plus Republican scientists have said that opinion was based on faulty and biased information, and LGBTQ plus activists have condemned the child abuse characterization. The order is partially blocked while a lawsuit is against it. Supervisors with the Department of Family and Protective Services ordered workers not to send emails or text messages about the probes, an unusual move since the department usually documents everything carefully, the Texas Tribune reports. Employees were told to apply this policy when communicating with the parents under investigation, as well as with some colleagues. They were advised not to post any opinions about Abbott's order on social media either. AIDS isn't even spread specifically by sex, it's blood and bodily fluids. Shake my head. Yeah, I mean, yes. That is the case, but yes. I don't even have another thing to say about that, but yes. So the publication was able to view, staff need to be clear that as state employees, their public/social media opinions must be neutral and non-existent, reads a message from Martin Lopez, a supervisor at DFPS. According to the Tribune, the publication was able to view DFPS communications after 900 pages of documents were released because of an open records request by watchdog group American Oversight. Documents also show that many DFPS employees objected to Abbott's order. One called it effing bullpoop. And another threatened to quit if he had to investigate a trans-affirming family. So far, 11 families have been investigated, and no children have been removed from their parents' custody. One of at least 2 lawsuits against Abbott's directive, a judge ruled in June that PFLAG members could not be investigated. The judge expected to rule on other probes in December. The Child Welfare Agency has been experiencing several crises. About 2,300 employees have quit this year due to both unmanageable workloads and the Abbott order. The Houston Chronicle reports. Greg Abbott doesn't like kids that don't look like his own, I guess. Yeah, also, there are dozens and sometimes hundreds of high-risk, high-need foster children who do not have a permanent placement. The paper notes instead the state lodges them in hotels and churches, taking caseworkers to supervise them, or tasking caseworkers with supervising them. Texas state agent has developed a program to help LGBTQ plus homeowners across the U.S. flee red Republican states. The realtor worked with us and kept introducing us as brothers. I don't think news. Then we couldn't get insurance to cover both of us. You couldn't have 2 men on the insurance policy. One of us had to be listed as a tenant. Our cable installer showed up and realized there were 2 men living in the house and left. Didn't finish the cable install. We had to call the company back out and have someone else do it. It's not like someone was beaten, wasn't a hate crime, but it doesn't give you any honor or any feeling of happiness as you're going through this process of starting your relationship and living together. People aren't recognizing you. So McCraney got into the estate agent business himself. He vowed to do things differently, serve everybody, and give them the respect they deserve. By 2009, found Texas Pride Realty. Basically, because the Republican hostility has increased, McCraney launched Flee Texas. I think I've talked about Flee Texas before, but yeah, no, people are trying to, if they can, get out, but I mean, this is still only a partial solution to things. Angels protect LGBTQ students and allies from a group of over 100 anti-queer protesters. So a group of quote-unquote angels, as pictured, recently protected LGBTQ students from anti-LGBTQ protesters at an event in Provo, Utah. Over 100 anti-LGBTQ protesters attended Back to School Pride Night, an event that connects queer Brigham Youth University students, faculty, and staff to locally supported businesses, students, and community members. The event featured family-friendly performances by 12 drag queens, including some current and former BYU students, as well as live music from local and touring bands, an art show, and over 80 vendors and organizations. The protesters shouted, "Pedophile, groomer, you're going against God, stop protecting the homos," and "Christ is King," the Salt Lake Tribune reported. Some carried handguns, waved U.S. flags, and held signs with anti-LGBTQ slogans and religious verses. Protesters, including local residents and conservative BYU students, complained about the event being held at a public park and called drag a sexual fetish that sexualizes children. Because didn't you know wearing dresses is inherently sexual, which is something I didn't know. The drag performances all featured child-friendly events of pop songs and had no nudity or even partial nudity, the event's lead organizer said. However, protesters were far outnumbered by event attendees and counter-protesters. The counter-protesters include about a dozen quote-unquote angels who showed up with wings made of white sheets draped over PVC pipes that extended 3 feet above their shoulders. Together, the angels formed a wall in front of the protesters, effectively blocking attendees from seeing the haters. The supporters waved rainbow flags in the gap between the angels. "I'm doing this because I want our LGBTQ community to feel like they can be themselves and know we have their backs," Sabrina Long, one of the angels, told the Salt Lake Tribune. Utah is run by Mormons. Yeah. The event, I mean, that doesn't change the fact that there are, obviously it's not, things aren't simple. There's a lot of good in this world too. Like even in Utah, where you have, which is largely Mormon run, you have events like this where angels show up. I don't know. The event was attended by roughly 300 people, including some children, was organized by Rainbow Collective, nonprofit supporting BYU's LGBTQ community. The collective founder, Madison Tenney, said that she expected protesters became more concerned when Provo police told her to expect a large group of them. All 12 of the event strike performers also received violent threats on social media before the event. And queer relationships can be grounds for expulsion from BYU, so this is sweet. So Tenney got the idea. Really? I did not know that. So Tenney got the idea to organize a group of angels to block the protests. A group known as the Angel Action Wings Project wore similar outfits in 1999 to block members of the rabidly anti-queer Westboro Baptist Church from protesting the trial and funeral connected to Matthew Shepard, a murdered gay 21-year-old University of Wyoming student. Similar angels also blocked anti-LGBTQ protesters who attended the funerals of 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting victims in Orlando, Florida. The counter-protesters also include a group called the Black Menaces, a group of BYU students who opposed prejudice on campus. Police monitored the crowd and broke up a few clashes between protesters and counter-protesters. Yeah, no, I'm really glad for the amount of support. In 2011, the school's honor code included a prohibition of homosexual advocacy, defined as seeking influence others to engage in homosexual behavior or promoting homosexual relations as being morally acceptable. The prohibition sounds primarily to Russia's law forbidding all homosexual propaganda. The school also recently threatened to arrest any students who protest the school's anti-LGBTQ policies and trashed school brochures welcoming LGBTQ freshmen. Yeah, you have to be Mormon in good standing to attend BYU. So yeah, okay, that's awesome that this happened, actually. Federal appeals court rules that against hate groups claim that ex-gay therapy is free speech, i.e. conversion therapy. Conversion therapy isn't free speech. Technically torture by all rules regarding what counts as torture. A federal appeals court has upheld a lower court ruling affirming that Washington state can legally ban conversion therapy, the widely debunked form of psychological torture that falsely claims to change people's sexual orientation and gender identities. A 3-panel judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit ruled against Brian Tingley, a licensed marriage counselor represented by the anti-LGBTQ hate group Alliance Defending Freedom, usually defending freedom by trying to destroy freedom. ADF says it plans to appeal the court's decision. Tingley and his ADF lawyers sued the state in 2021, alleging that the 2018 law banning conversion therapy for minors violated his freedom of speech and religion. A federal judge threw Tingley's case out in August 2021, saying the state had the authority to regulate professional conduct. In response, ADF attorneys appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court. ADF attorneys argued that Tingley used nothing but ordinary counseling methods when addressing children's sexual orientation and gender identity struggles. I'm sorry. I can't, like, I don't blame the judge for throwing this out. Like, someone with the last name Tingley talking about how he's just using ordinary methods to take care of children with their sexual and identity struggles. Like, nah, Tingley's too creepy a last name. Like, I get it. I shouldn't shame people for the last name, but it's hard when you end up with there's way too many conservative pedophiles out there, and when they're saying shit like this, it does not help. Despite their claims, the appeals court recently ruling noted that every major medical, psychiatric, psychological, and professional mental health organization opposes conversion therapy, Bloomberg Law reported. The court wrote, in relying on the body of evidence before it was well as the medical recommendations of expert organizations, the Washington legislature rationally acted by amending its regulatory scheme for licensed healthcare providers to add performing conversion therapy on patient under age 18 to the list of unprofessional conduct for health professionals. There's not a lot more to say that. Teen sex trafficking victim awaits sentencing for killing alleged rapist. Faces up to 20 years in prison. in Polk County courtroom. Piper Lewis, 17, is facing sentencing after pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter in the killing of her alleged rapist back in June 2020. Piper was 15, being raped and sexually abused by 37-year-olds. As reported by Blaze Media, Lewis was just 15 years old when she was charged with first-degree murder after the killing of Zachary Brooks, 37, who allegedly raped her numerous times in the weeks leading up to his death. After running away from home several times between the months of March and June 2020, Lewis met a 28-year-old musician who offered to take her in. However, he had ill intentions, including forced a young, homeless, and impressionable Lewis to have sex with various men, including Brooks. According to Lewis's attorneys, on May 31st, she refused to go to Brooks' apartment, and the musician reacted by cutting her neck and demanding her to go. People reports, according to Lewis's plea agreement, for the next 2 nights, she was forced to strip, drink alcohol, and smoke marijuana by Brooks and 2 other people, according to the Des Moines Register. Weeks later, while visiting Brooks's home in June, Lewis fell asleep and was awakened to Brooks raping her. Once he fell asleep, the then 15-year-old says she noticed a knife on the nightstand as she was getting ready to leave. Lewis used the knife to kill Brooks as he slept, stabbing him 30 times. She stated in a plea deal that she hadn't planned his murder but was overcome with rage after being raped again. People reports the charges against Lewis were considered at juvenile court hearing on July 6, 2021. A district associate judge waived her case to adult court because, as we know, 15-year-olds who are raped repeatedly are clearly adults. Sorry, allegedly raped repeatedly are clearly adults. Yeah, no, this... the team now faces up to 10 years in prison on each charge. Also, where she pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and willful injury. Which, that is what those... yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, after... Oh, sorry. That was the same thing. Anyways, as listed before, that was a news statement. Anyways, as reported by the Des Moines Register, Robert Hinscherf, the executive director of the Center for Law, Brain and Behavior in Boston, testified on behalf of Lewis, stating that although the chance of her committing crime in the future would not be zero, a violent attack made by an adolescent isn't an indicator of violent tendencies in the future. I think it's highly unlikely that Piper would have done this on her own without these circumstances, Hinscherf said, taking her anxiety and post-traumatic stress symptoms into consideration. While in juvenile detention, Lewis graduated from high school. Wednesday was the first day of her sentencing hearing, which took place in a Polk County courtroom. The musician who trafficked Lewis and brought her to Zachary Brooks has not been charged. I think she should have a lighter sentence. I don't think she should have been charged as an adult. I know this is a shock. Or at the very least should have gotten a lighter sentence. I don't think there was a reason for 10 years for an already traumatic incident to just be like, hey, you could use more trauma. So the charges were faces up to 20 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. Like maybe 2 or 3 years. Sorry, that was the last one. But yeah. So, federal court blocks ruling in limiting voting accessibility for disabled people. Wisconsin federal court on Wednesday blocked a state elections rule that would have forced disabled voters to cast their own ballots. So, yay that they blocked that BS law. Black TikTokers started securing job interviews only after listing her race as white. So she did an experiment. For the past 6 months, she said she's been angrily and aggressively looking for a new job. Absolutely no callbacks, no texts back, no emails back. Then she tried. She then shared that she tried everything to help her job search go well, including revamping her resume 3 different times and applying to at least 3 different jobs every single day. She put her middle name on applications with the intention to make her name come off as "quote unquote" a little less ethnic, as she puts it. She then came across a content creator who recommended the applicant color should mark the race as white to help secure job interviews. Despite her initial skepticism, she decided to follow through suit. Changed her race to white, and she had 4 interviews next week. Because, yes, this could be a corollary thing, although given that systemic attitudes still exist. Yeah, so, sorry if I'm going through this relatively quickly. I just looked at how much time had passed and how many stories were left, and I was like, oh shit. So, judge strikes down St. Kitts anti-gay law. So, top court for 9 Eastern Caribbean nations and territories ruled that sexual orientation is protected under the right to privacy, invalidating colonial-era laws that criminalized homosexual behavior in St. Kitts and Nevis. Anti-sodomy laws were challenged in court, and it seems like they won. So that's good. Country star raises over $100,000 for trans youth after denouncing influencers' transphobia. So Tucker Carlson called Morris a quote-unquote lunatic and a quote-unquote fake country music singer after mentioning Morris's public statements against transphobic comments made by Brittany Kerr Eldine. Eldine is a beauty lifestyle influencer married to Grammy-nominated country music artist Jason Eldine. Morris immediately mocked Tucker Carlson's insult by publishing a fake image of herself with a chyron from Carlson's show, declaring her as a lunatic country music person. Morris then published a tweet announcing the sale of the t-shirt with the words Maren Morris, lunatic country music person on it. The shirt also had the phone number of the Trans Lifeline, a peer support phone service run by trans people for trans and questioning peers. All supports will be split between Trans Lifeline and the GLAAD trans media programs. Morris wrote in the tweet. By Labor Day, Morris announced on Twitter over 100K has been raised. Have a great Labor Day weekend, lunatics. Susan Sarandon came out as bi. That's one of the smaller stories. I want to get to the good story. 4chan trolls target Trevor Project suicide hotline and hope LGBTQ kids will die. Anti-LGBTQ users on 4chan targeted the Trevor Project suicide prevention services on Tuesday in an effort to prevent LGBTQ youth from getting help. On posting on the notorious platform's quote-unquote politically incorrect image board, an anonymous user posted a plan to bog down nonprofit organizations' crisis hotline and online chats with fake requests for help. The goal was to fuck up the queue so sodomites and F-slur commit suicide, to demoralize the therapists and waste as much of their resources as possible. According to the Daily Dot, the original thread appears to have been deleted, but it's unclear whether it was removed by 4chan or the original poster. A second thread has been archived and was still visible on the site as of Tuesday evening. Yeah, it's... Some people on the internet are especially cruel. This I just thought was funny. So apparently there's a TikTok video out there that shows two Mormon missionaries basically, I mean, they say fleeing, they're clearly just walking away. But they saw the lesbian couple's gayest place in town doormat, and they just sort of like walked off, which understandable, but it's nice to know that you can that's all it takes if you don't want to have Mormons knocking on your door. Good info to have. Failed GOP candidate says God will end COVID-19 if U.S. condemns all gay people to death. MAGA, American First Republican House candidate from Virginia recently posted bizarre video where he laughs about COVID-19 deaths and says the disease is God's punishment for homosexuality in America, that the only way to stop COVID-19 is to make homosexuality a national crime punishable by death, which is why conservatives are more likely to die. Wait, no, that doesn't make sense. Anyways, see, I had wholesome stories. And then I spent too long on the depressing stories. This is my problem. Channing Crowder can't stop staring at Saquon Barkley's beautiful fucking thighs. Look, I appreciate stories like this because I think part of the problem is the general lack of connection. There, like, a lot of the problems is there are certain aspects of masculinity that get enforced, and there are certain aspects of masculinity that get rejected. And you're supposed to stick too close to a particular behavior, otherwise it's problematic to some people. I don't know. It's just this whole thing. So as much as I want to talk about Brittany Griner, which I do, and just a reminder, she, to my knowledge, and it could be wrong, she, I believe, is still in a Russian prison for having medical cannabis for chronic pain. So and this is going into the nature of disability and sports and all this stuff. But unfortunately, I only have so much time to talk, and I can't get into the details of this article, which will still be down below. These articles will be down below. I recommend reading anything you were interested in and we didn't get into full detail about, like the beautiful fucking thighs. But yeah, so decades after 9/11, Muslims battle Islamophobia in the US. This is, once again, I may have had too many articles this week. Islamophobia is still a big thing. Xenophobic commentary, yeah. There's a lot of these aspects that were... There were aspects of this that were brought up in the film that happened shortly before September 11th. It brought up Islamophobia and the problems, and it's just one of those things where a lot worse happened than what happened in... what was that movie? Yeah. I can't even think of the name of the movie. Something's falling, whatever. It's one of those things where people were aware of various things going on, and one of the main, at least one of the major characters is Islam and just trying to live his life. I think that was the character played by I can't think of actors. Anyways, moving on. High-tech hats, remapped buttons, gaming got more accessible to to disabled people. So, this person has muscular atrophy. His body doesn't make protein. His spine isn't sending messages to his muscles. The effect is slow but certain shutting down. He was 9 when he lost the ability to breathe on his own and switched to ventilator. By 10, his arms could no longer push his wheelchair. The physical, they say the physical world presented more obstacles, but some of it is just the physical world manufactured for non-disabled people. But that's another story. Gaming for me has always been an equalizer when I couldn't go and do whatever activity was popular. Xbox Mass, yeah. So basically, once arms got too tired to push buttons on the computers, keyboard, spun, switched to a game that mostly just used the mouse. When I could no longer use a mouse, he switched to a high-tech hat. An infrared hat that I use to operate most of my computer's functions. And voice functions are also a thing, not for this specifically, but I know mostly One-Handed Gamer uses voice functions. There's a lot of options out there with technology. SMA's, yeah, I know. SMA's disability gentleness, yes. This is Steve Spohn, which is a different person with that same disability. This is saying demand for technologies for disabled people in Asia Pacific countries and affordability and availability of right devices emerge as major issues, according to UN support. And once again, this is one of the ones that's hard for me to go into all the details in, because I am low on time. So, in Australia, rugby star Gareth Thompson spat at in the street and called an AIDS spreader. So, gay rugby star and outspoken HIV advocate Gareth Thomas said he was spat at in the street after allegations of spreading HIV to his ex emerged. The former athlete was accused of deceptively transmitting HIV because homophobia has not stopped. Um, spat at, called an AIDS spreader, told I should be locked up, that I should die, and much worse. Because homophobia. Apparently there's a proposal for a hijab ban in Denmark, and I believe there are similar proposals in France. France has been really bad about hijab-related stuff. Sometimes I'm bad speaking. Anyways, a Danish Commission for the Forgotten Struggle, about body set up by Denmark's ruling Social Democratic Party, has recommended the country's government ban hijabs for students in Danish elementary schools, which is against freedom of religion, against bodily autonomy, against so much. August 24th proposal is one of 9 recommendations with the stated aim of preventing honor-related social control of girls from minority backgrounds. The other recommendations propose providing Danish language courses, promoting modern child upbringing practices in ethnic minority families, and strengthening sexual education in elementary schools. So, like, some of these aspects sound good. Some of these aspects sound like ethnic cleansing of a particular sort of like what we did to Native Americans in America. Hudamakai Ascar, probably slaughtered the name. 15 would be forced to take off her headscarf if the ban is implemented. The 9th grader at the Kokkedal School, a school outside of the Danish capital Copenhagen, with close to 800 students, has been wearing a hijab for 2 years. I have always known that we have freedom of religion in Denmark. I can wear what I want, I can believe what I like. So when I heard about the proposal, I was surprised, she told Al Jazeera on the phone. Oscar feels the idea of a ban violates her freedom and that of girls like her, and that is wrong to force her to take her headscarf off, which is true. It's controlling what people wear to control how they express themselves. It's not that different from homophobic or transphobic laws. Iran to execute 2 prominent LGBTQ activists for promoting homosexuality. Iran's Revolutionary Court of Urmia has sentenced 2 prominent LGBTQ activists to death. According to Hanga, human rights organization which reports on human rights violations in the Kurdistan region, 31-year-old Zara Stiki Ahmadani and 24-year-old Ilham Chibdar were accused by the Urmia Public Prosecutor's Office in January of corruption on earth through promoting homosexuality, promoting Christianity, and communicating with the media opposing the Islamic Republic. Despite intelligence forces and organization also renewed its call on Iran to decriminalize same-sex conduct and release people detained for reasons relating to sexual orientation and gender identity. Amnesty in Iran is the organization against these Iranian rulings. Jamaican senator calls for LGBTQ plus protections, but support for abolishing gay sex ban is scarce. Unfortunately. Unlikely they're promoting Christianity. Yeah. Especially given... Yeah. Anyways, I agree with you there, Jinx Tiapan. I don't think they're promoting Christianity. But we're running low on time. So a Jamaican senator has called for the creation of an Anti-Discrimination Act to protect country's LGBTQ plus community. Natalie Campbell Rodriguez, right? Whatever. Gave a State of the Nation presentation to Jamaica's Senate on Friday, the 9th of September. During the speech, she pointed to data produced by Jamaica Forums for Lesbians, All Sexual and Gays, J-Flag on discrimination, ill treatment, and stigma against members of the LGBTQ plus community. J-Flag survey, which polled 1,043 people, showed that 50% of those sampled had positive attitudes towards the LGBTQ plus community on issues such as education. Sadly, the same poll found 67% response didn't support amending laws to decriminalize same-sex intimacy. These hardships, however, can be helped with specific steps relating to changes with certain laws and development of Anti-Discrimination Act, as well as changes to as a change to in our mindset of how we treat our fellow human beings. Currently, anal sex can be punished by hard labor and up to 10 years in prison, with gross indecency punishable by up to 2 years incarceration. There are no protections of LGBTQ plus people against discrimination. Basically, various places are saying that they should decriminalize it, which, yeah. Russia bid to extend vile LGBTQ plus propaganda ban to adults inches forward. Basically, the anti-LGBTQ plus thing in Russia is likely to be on Wednesday. Anyone from abroad who violates the law face deportation. Yeah, it's a lot of bans and that stuff. Thousands of Serbians protest upcoming LGBTQ Pride Parade for the second time, which happened in Belgrade. Thousands of Serbians taking to the streets to protest LGBTQ rights. Heterosexual marriage definitions of concern for gay Singaporeans. Marriage is being stressed in Singapore as between a man and a woman. I think I covered a little bit more in this, but once again, if you're watching this on YouTube, the stories are below. Sri Lanka president says his government won't oppose decriminalization of homosexuality. The president of Sri Lanka said his government won't oppose a bill to decriminalize homosexuality, but added the bill must gain support before any laws can change. On the 11th of September, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who has, I probably slaughtered that name too, has held his role since July this year, said the government will not oppose private members' bill presented to Parliament by MP Permanath Dolawat to decriminalize homosexuality. Sorry about slaughtering names. I'm bad sometimes. Anyways, same-sex relationships are currently illegal in Sri Lanka, as well as other discriminatory laws against trans people and sex workers. The bill seeks to decriminalize same-sex activity between consenting adults by amending sections 365 and 365A of Sri Lanka's Penal Code. However, it will require support from individual members of Parliament, as the president explained during talks with Samantha Power, the administrator of the United States Agency for International Development. According to Columbia, said, "We're all for it, but we have to get the support of individual members. It's a matter of their private conscience." But the fact that the president is at the very least not opposed to it suggests that there is some option for it to go past. Swedish election, far-right party with neo-Nazi roots set to become the second largest in parliament. The Swedish election has seen the far-right make worrying gains, with former neo-Nazi group snapping up 1 in 5 votes. The far-right Sweden Democrats Party, which has roots in neo-Nazism and a history of anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigration sentiment, gained approximately 20% of the vote, with just under 95% of the vote counted. It is poised to become the second largest party in parliament, with 73 seats, a gain of 11 to the center-left. Social Democrats 108, up 8 and representing 30% of the vote. Conclusive results will be known after the votes of the Swedish nationals living abroad are counted, but exit polls have predicted that the incumbent left-wing coalition led by the Social Democrats will remain in power. But it's still messed up that neo-Nazi group got that far up. 13-year-old beaten up in horrific hate-filled attack for wearing rainbow flag to Pride. 13-year-old was reportedly assaulted while leaving Pride event in Great Yarmouth. Norfolk police told Pink News they're aware of 2 reported incidents of GYW Pride, which took place in Great Yarmouth on Saturday. Officers say the first incident happened in the town's marketplace between 1:15 and 1:25 p.m. and saw a man make homophobic and religiously aggravated comments to a girl in her early teens who was walking past, causing her to feel alarmed and distressed. Hours later, a teenager believed to be 13 was assaulted in St. George's Park at 8:19 p.m. as he was leaving a Pride event. Police said he was attacked for expressing his sexuality and wearing a Pride flag. A man in his 20s has been arrested in connection with the incidents and released under investigations. Investigations are ongoing. Royal Commission told disability homes spend $2 per person a day on food. 2 privately run disability homes in Melbourne. Oh, I should have had this a little earlier. My bad. We're spending just $2 per person a day on food before the state government seized control and commissioned aged care provider Wintringham Management. Wintringham staff told the Royal Commission staff told the Royal Commission into violence, abuse, neglect, exploitation of disabled people of their alarm at conditions supported residential services in Sydenham, Grace, and Grace Manor, which were closed this year. Said this organization spent $24 per day per person on food, whereas facilities he took over were spending just $2 per person. Found the door was padlocked at night, which raised fire danger concern, boxes of opened and unopened mail, and foul-smelling bedrooms. So, disabled people tortured because... Not surprised. So, DWP hounded disabled woman for years before her starvation death. Papers show a disabled woman whose body was found in her flat months after her benefits had been removed, had been hounded for years by the Department for Work and Pensions and repeatedly failed by other public bodies, documents have shown. So this is this has been a continual problem in the UK, where disabled people are basically not getting the benefits they need and are dying. LGBT Alliance lawyer compares trans healthcare in UK to forced transition in Iran, because the LGBT Alliance is awful and they've been suggesting anything trans is forced. Labour faces legal action from disabled members over institutional discrimination. Disabled activists have warned Labour that faces possible legal action if it continues to refuse to act to end years of disability discrimination against party members. which is another continual problem in the UK, because disability rights is still are being fought for here, and they're being fought for in the UK, and they're being fought for in Canada. Speaking of UK, though, Liz Truss wants to block Scotland's urgent reform of gender recognition laws, including self-ID. This is one of those things where Scotland was trying to do their best to make Scotland more inclusive. Liz Truss is trying to tear that down. The UK Prime Minister has asked lawyers to help pause or prevent the Scottish government from reforming its Gender Recognition Act. Two whistleblowers told Vice World News. Basically, Liz Truss is trying to undo any gender reform. A UK rail operator admits to breaching Equality Act on access for more than a decade. UK has had, I'm sure I've mentioned on this program several times before, the UK's problem with accessibility in train stations has been a continual thing. But I do want to give myself enough time for the main story. So, Liz Truss urged to ditch dangerous Rwanda asylum plan that could kill LGBTQ plus refugees. Now, I don't think Liz Truss cares about LGBTQ plus refugees, so while she's being urged to drop this, I'm sure she will continue it. This is my personal opinion. We will find out what Liz Truss thinks later. And finally, we are moving on to Canada, and I apologize for rushing through stuff. So there's a lot of anti-Indigenous hate in Canada, and once again, Canada's trying to beat US in terms of awful, and I mean, well, they haven't succeeded. They're doing a good job. So, a horrifying video of Indigenous women being attacked by a mob of white people for not wearing a bra has gone viral on Twitter. The clip, shared and taken by the victim, Laura Gragnon, shows the mob accosting her, and one suspect, who the police have yet to publicly identify, appears to strike her. Now, I was originally going to play this video, but I'm afraid the most important story in my mind, the most important story that which I feel the need to go over, which is why what I titled this episode with relation to, is all the problems with disability stuffs in Canada. So, Nova Scotia does not have a precise timeline for phasing out large institutional housing for disabled people. The Deputy Manager of the Department of Community Services told Legislature hearing Tuesday the government is committed to closing the facilities as called for by in a decade-old report, but it needs to ensure residents are supported as they move into smaller homes in the community. We need to move at a speed that allows us to ensure that we have the human resource capacity to support individuals as they transition to communities. The person told the community that we respect where and how they like to live and support them appropriately, and that's going to take us some time. Now, this is more wholesome than I thought, given the other two stories. But this is good. I'm glad to have at least something good to talk about in more depth. Anyways, but I'm not sure this is moving fast enough, or as fast as it should. Last October, the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal ruled that the province's failure to offer meaningful access to housing services for disabled people amounted to a violation of their basic rights. The Deputy Minister said there are 8 adult residence and regional rehabilitation centers that are still open, with one, Harborside Lodge in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, which currently houses 22 people, slated to close by the end of this year. Tawil said her department needs to guard against the risk of creating mini institutions in smaller homes if there isn't appropriate support. Which, hearing that is kind of fair if they're talking about creating systemic change. So this person might actually be doing the right thing. We don't want this. We need communities to be able to support and welcome in the richness that comes from individuals who have a range of abilities that's going to take some time to build. Now, range of abilities tends to go along with other talking points, which I'm not going to get into super detailed, but yeah, 2013 report done for the government known as the Roadmap called for phasing out institutional facilities and replacing them with small option homes by 2023. We can't commit that they will be closed by 2023. That would be false. Tawil said. Vicky Levac, spokeswoman for the Disability Rights Coalition of Nova Scotia, told reporters that the government is still using an incremental approach to solve a human rights issue that requires more immediate action. Gotcha. Okay. So the person in the Disability Rights Coalition is suggesting that they are going excessively slowly. One thing COVID-19 taught me is when there's government we can do things very quickly. Okay, that's fair. Said Levac, who has cerebral palsy and still waiting to move outside a Halifax area nursing home. She said she's been institutionalized against her will for the past 10 years. Yeah, that's the thing about a lot of situations like that. There's people can't get out of facilities. They need like special permission to get out. Special documentation. Levac expressed frustration over the lack of government timelines for closure of large facilities, calling it concerning. If there's no timelines, they can't be held accountable, Levac said. Sheila Wildman, Dalhousie University law professor and member of the Community Homes Action Group, told the committee Tuesday that hundreds of people continue to live in large institutional settings and more than 1,000 others live in settings with pressing support needs. What is needed for the government to meet its obligations now are transparent and enforceable goals and standards anchored in human rights and the voices of disabled people. Giles told to reporters that Nova Scotia is the last jurisdiction in Canada to close large institutions. In the U.S., 22-person is a small institution or mid-sized group home. Okay. According to the Department of Community Services, 498 people were housed in adult residential and regional rehabilitation centers as of March 31st. Another 375 were housed in residential care facilities, which provide permanent government-assisted housing for people who need personal care and assistance with day-to-day life. There are also 199 people under the age of 55 housed in long-term facilities as of April 1st. The department said that number could include people with disabilities, but could also include individuals with other medical conditions that require support, such as early onset dementia, which arguably could be classified as a disability given the nature of it. Anyways. So this story. So when the law got changed to only allow mental disability, I realized that depression could be enough, but I forgot to factor in PTSD. So Colby Koch, who writes for the National Post, posted an update on August 30th of their story of the Veteran Affairs Canada worker who advocated euthanasia for PTSD. So Kosh, who does not oppose MAID, wrongly states that euthanasia is a form of medical treatment under Canadian law. In fact, euthanasia was legalized in Canada as an exception to homicide in the criminal code. Nonetheless, Kosh collates the information concerning the veteran with PTSD who was urged to ask for euthanasia by the Veterans Affairs worker. Kosh writes, a couple of weeks ago, Global News shocked the conscience of the country with a news item about a suffering Canadian combat survivor who called into Veteran Affairs to talk about medical treatment and was given an unexpected, unwanted lecture about assisted suicide. Or CPTSD, or autism. Yeah, so according to Global's initial report, the man was recovering from a brain injury suffered on duty along with PTSD, or post-traumatic stress, which, while not a veteran of combat, I also probably suffer from PTSD from emotional abuse, and I definitely suffered a traumatic brain injury, some of which is not recoverable. I suspect, based on the fact that I can't control my emotions as well as I used to. There's a lack of emotional regulation. Everything feels more intense than it used to. Anyways, but he was also improving mentally and physically, and was so surprised and discouraged when he was asked whether he had thought about killing himself with doctor's help. What the fuck? No. Bad doctors. Global has not identified the veteran, but in days after the original story broke, its reporters continued to tack on the dreadful new details. On August 16th, Global had said the man was casually offered help in seeking medically assisted death. By the 19th, the network learned that the Veterans Affairs agent had brought up euthanasia repeatedly and persisted even after being asked to shut the fuck up about it. Sorry, I added the fuck in this sentence. The caseworker had also boasted, it is said, about being able to help another combat veteran obtain assisted suicide, and added that such death was quote-unquote better than blowing his brains out all over the wall or driving his car into something. This attitude, I hate this attitude. I hate it. It's saying, I couldn't live with this sort of thing, so clearly it's impossible for you to live with this sort of thing. Nothing listed here is that far off from what I go through on a daily basis. And I don't want to die. People shouldn't be pressured to die. Notice that the caseworker had also boasted about helping another combat veteran attain assisted suicide. So, like I said, this is my problem with the new law in place. Conceptually, obviously medical drugs are to die are cheap, yeah, but like this sort of stuff is what I was concerned about with the recent Canadian law expanding the maid service. And yeah, Kosh explains the Veterans Affairs Canada respond by launching an investigation into the story. Kosh then analyzes this story with respect to people experiencing suicidal ideation. Kosh writes, the harm done to Global's veteran by the mention of assisted suicide option seems like something that is awfully hard to control in practice. Of course, people speaking for a quote-unquote Veterans Affairs department should not actively try to literally harangue clients to death but we're going to have to begin to have different rules for different groups who are exposed to a high risk of... But are we going to begin to have different rules for different groups who are exposed to high risk of suicide? It's worth remembering that military personnel are not the only occupational group that have this feature. There are several trades known to have something like double the background risk of suicide. And for men, altogether, out of work is higher than that. Commenting with self-rage with respect to a Canadian veteran who served Canada and is not experiencing suicidal ideation can't be fully understood outside the context of the many people with disabilities who are also living in poverty who have died by euthanasia because they're lacking the necessary medical and social supports. Chronic care is expensive. Yeah, I mean, Canada's euthanasia law has gone out of control and needs to be honestly reviewed, yet the current government is not actually reviewing it, but proposing expansions of it. So this gives links. The story is definitely in... will be linked below in the YouTube version of this. Yeah, like, so this is, I'm concerned about this ideal human philosophical perspective that doesn't care about the harm it causes. So this is more about MAID. Legally assisted suicide puts disabled people in danger of being killed on the basis of disability alone. This is especially true when assisted suicide laws allow someone other than the patient to administer the drug. The authors claim that denying someone euthanasia is an ADA violation. Their argument is that getting assistance in administering the lethal drug should be seen as a quote-unquote reasonable accommodation used to allow someone without the physical capacity to take the drug access to assisted suicide. The provision of the ADA cited in the article to support this claim states that quote-unquote, no qualified individual with a disability shall be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefits of services, programs, or activities of a public entity or be subjected to discrimination by any such entity when reasonable accommodations can be provided. There's a much more compelling case for invoking the ADA here that focuses less on making it easier for disabled people to die and more on making it easier for us to live life on our own terms in places where assisted suicide is legal. Disabled people who wish to die, some actually terminal, some are not, are given the tools to do so, while non-disabled people who wish to die are given access to mental health services. Is being coerced towards choosing death really an example of disabled people accessing the benefits of services, programs, or activities of a public entity? Is being denied mental health treatment because of our lives seen as less valuable than the lives of disabled people not a more pressing example of the ADA being violated? Thaddeus Pope, co-author of the article, has himself admitted that he sees having a disability and not exclusively a terminal prognosis as an accessible reason for someone to be permitted to die by assisted suicide. See, this is the thing. Doctors, this is so common that doctors say it, that it would be better for you to die than be disabled. And that's never been the case, and it's so many levels of upsetting to me. It's a projection of a world which would rather have disabled people die than be reminded that disability exists. Hello? Hello, Chumcher. But, yeah, we reject this notion. True healthcare includes treatment and resources that allow someone to live with as little pain and with as much independence as possible. Now, conceptually, once again, I'm not opposed to assisted suicide conceptually, but in practice, it's oftentimes used as a band-aid to other problems, other societal problems overall. Is pee stored in the balls? No, that's not. That's basic medical knowledge that tends not to happen. Anyways, legal assisted suicide, which systemic levels results in the premature and unnecessary deaths of people in our communities members, is not a service program or activity that disabled people benefit from. This blatant misuse of the ADA. It is clear that the authors of this article are out of touch with the core tenets of disability justice, which state that, in part, we have a responsibility to keep each other safe. Policies that champion the desires of individuals over the safety and vitality of the most marginalized disabled people are not grounded in true disability justice framework. Disabled people do not need more help dying. Crisis standards of care in the face of COVID-19 that deprioritize us for treatment, our profit-driven healthcare system that regularly denies care for those who need it most, and general societal attitude that people are better off dead than disabled make death more accessible to us than life. That the ADA, while imperfect, was passed because the disabled community worked to ensure that the inherent value of our lives would be recognized in the eyes of the law. It should not be used to further jeopardize the safety of the most vulnerable members of our community. And that is, in essence, words. My brain just shut off, apparently. So, I'll be the ending of the show, briefly, and then, I will switch things up for League of Legends after this. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, like, comment, and subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. Have a good one. Oops, wrong ending. No. There we go. It screwed me up, my own thing.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Sex and race, because they are easy, visible differences, have been the primary ways of organizing human beings into superior and inferior groups, and into the cheap labor on which this system still depends.
No, you all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all?
We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
Freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all.
All we are doing with this bill is allowing two people who love each other to have that love recognised by way of marriage. That is all we are doing.
I speak not for myself, but for those without voice can be heard. Those who have fought for their rights. Their right to live in peace.
Sometimes, especially in this body, I feel as though if Christ himself walked through these doors and said what he said thousands of years ago, he would be maligned as a radical and rejected from these doors.